Hello and welcome everyone to our live free event on the topic of opening statements. And the master at getting to presidents, CEOs, and owners is Tony Parinello.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you. And Beth's going to be advancing the slides. And so, Beth, here again, welcome everyone. And Beth, let's automatically and very quickly go to the very next slide here. And let's talk about this metaphor of an elevator pitch, because I love this metaphor. I mean, picture this. You're in an elevator. All of a sudden, before the doors close, someone jumps in that is either a prospect, maybe at a convention you're at or a trade show. And as the doors close, the person says to you, so what do you do? Who do you work for and what do you do? And maybe you have, one or two floors, which is just a few seconds, to articulate to this person what it is you do. So what would you say to snag the intentional area of their brain? I love this metaphor. Or you're in an existing account building and you're getting into the elevator and all of a sudden someone jumps into the elevator before the doors close and it's the president of the company that you've never met. What would you say to he or she in that few seconds that you have their undivided attention and they're like trapped in this elevator with you for a couple of floors? So we're going to talk about your elevator pitch today. And Beth, if you would, go to the next slide, which is my promise to each and every one of you. And that is, I am not going to ask you to do anything in your sales process, in your sales career, that I don't do in my sales process, in my career today. When I stop doing what I teach, I'll stop teaching it. I'll get somebody else to teach it. But I'm still in the game. I'm not an armchair salesperson. I've had the honor of sharing my tactics with over 2.5 million salespeople so far in the last 30 some odd years. And the majority of the Fortune 1000 companies use some portion of my stuff. So it is bulletproof. This isn't like, a test. What I'm going to share with you today is stuff that I use, that my alumni use. We get great results of getting appointments with those difficult to reach people that I call VITO. So my promise to you, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I don't do in my sales work today. And Beth, if you would, the next slide, let me know when you're there. It's the at the prospecting for new business and growing business and existing accounts.
We are there.
Okay, so now what we're going to talk about and can apply when you're looking for brand new business. You're dialing for dollars or whatever, you're smiling and dialing, whatever you call it, new logos, white space, hunting, whatever label you put on it, prospecting for new business, also to grow the business in your existing accounts. Each and every one of us that have been selling for a while, we have existing accounts. So the question quickly becomes, do you have all the business you deserve in those existing accounts or just a thin slice? Because if you have just a thin slice or a little itsy bitsy bit, then it's time to grow the account. So this type of approach, this telephone opening statement, elevator pitch, works well in both of these types of situations. Now, Beth, if you would go to the next slide.
Okay.
This is all about VITO. Those of you who are familiar with my work, VITO stands for the very important top officer. It's the person with the ultimate veto power over all decisions, including the decision to buy your stuff. And VITOs have titles like, owner, president, CEO, and other privileged C-suite executive titles, like a CMO or a CIO or a CFO. They all fall into this category of VITO. But understand, when you hear me say the word VITO, I'm referring to the person who has that ultimate veto power to either say yes when everyone else is saying no, or no when everyone else is saying yes when it comes to buying your stuff. So Beth, if you would, the next slide, which is our important VITO rule.
We are there.
You are going to be sent to the person you sound the most like. So when you pick up that 3,000-pound phone and you make a prospecting call, and if you sound like a technologist, you will be sent to the technology department. If you sound like a VITO, a CEO, president, or owner, you will be connected with the CEO, president, or owner. This is a fact of life. It's a fact in sales, and much to our dismay, when we get sent off to some other person that we really don't want to be talking to, it's because we sound like that person. So, we point our fingers at these gatekeepers. Well, the gatekeeper, rejected me and sent me to the purchasing department. That's because we sounded like a purchasing agent. So this is an important veto rule to remember as we move forward. And Beth, if you would, our next slide, the primary objective.
Okay.
Is to get a tell me more response. And we really want that response from VITO or VITO's private assistant. Yes, a tell me more response. We want VITO to lean into rather than push away from what we're saying. We want to snag the intentional area of VITO's brain. We want to do this very quickly, and we want to do it very effectively. And like anything else, the more we do something, usually if we're trained well and we're mentored well and coached well, we get better and better at it. So your results are going to get better and better and better. The more you do this, the more we reach out to VITO, snag the intentional area of their brain, get a tell me more response, and start a conversation. That's what an elevator pitch and telephone opening statement is all about, to get a conversation going. Beth, if you would, the next slide, we're going to define what an opening statement is.
Okay.
All right. The definition of our opening statement is what we're going to say until we get interrupted. And we want to get interrupted with a tell me more response. So it is the monologue, just what we're going to say to get a tell me more response and get interrupted. That's the definition. What we're going to say until we get interrupted. Now, Beth, if you would, the next slide to look at the two goals of our opening statement.
Yep.
To make it sound conversational, not like you're reading it off a piece of paper, just like two VITOs having a chat, and to get interrupted as soon as possible. And the reason I say that, we're going to design and write a elevator pitch and telephone opening statement that we're never going to finish, because somewhere in the middle of it, we want to get interrupted with a tell me more response. So actually, we're going to create something that hopefully we're never going to have to say the whole thing. Now, the reason we want to get interrupted by VITO is because the person who is speaking in any conversation has the implied power, control, and authority. And we know that the VITOs of the world love power, control, and authority. So we want to get interrupted as soon as possible, get VITO talking, and we're listening. Another reason is that we're not learning anything when we're talking. We learn when we listen, especially when we listen to a VITO. So, two goals: make it sound conversational, not scripted, not like you're reading it off a piece of paper. As a matter of fact, you're never going to read it off a piece of paper. You're going to internalize it. You'll never say it the same way twice. And don't worry about being perfect. Perfection is a waste of time. Now, and we get interrupted as soon as possible. Beth, if you would, the next slide dives into our 5-second rule.
Okay.
We have a short 5 seconds to capture VITO's attention, to break preoccupation and snag the intentional area of their brain. 5 seconds. What could you possibly say in 5 seconds that'll do that? Besides, we have pictures and they're going up on the internet tonight. You'll find out in a minute. No, we're not going to say that, but we need to say something that will break preoccupation and get VITO to listen to what we have to say. 5 seconds. Now, if we do a good job in the first 5 seconds, we're going to get rewarded with a few more seconds. So this is like a virtual 5-second world. Every 5 seconds or less, we're going to be earning the next 5 seconds. Now, to do this effectively, there are some don'ts. So Beth, if you would, let's go to the next slide.
Don'ts.
This is the stuff we never want to do during our elevator pitch or telephone opening statement. Now, as I go through these don'ts, please don't get your feelings hurt if you say, well, geez, I've done that, I do that, oh my God, I always do that one. Don't worry about that, because we're here to first identify what we're doing wrong, or not as right as it could be, and how to correct it. So let's go look right now at the first list of don'ts. Next slide, if you would, Beth.
We are there.
And by the way, these don'ts apply to the opening statement. And how long does the opening statement last? That's right. As soon as you get interrupted, the opening statement's done and the conversation begins. However, most all of these don'ts apply to the entire first conversation and the entire relationship you're going to have with VITO. First of all, if you took the time to send a letter, an email, or some kind of LinkedIn invite, don't ever say to a VITO, did you get my letter? Did you get that email I sent you? Because chances are that they're going to say, no, what letter? And then all you've done is reminded them that they're at the preliminary stages of a memory retention problem. And that's not a good way to build business rapport with anybody, especially a VITO. Now, I will help you write a letter. I will help you write an email. I will help you create a LinkedIn invite and a VITO presentation. But here's the deal. When we send it to VITO, we're never going to ask them if they got it. Instead, we're going to say something that would remind them of the letter, the email, or the invitation. And then when a VITO says to you, well, wait, this sounds familiar. Did you send me a letter or something like that? You can say, yeah, what'd you think of it? And it's done. So we're never going to ask anyone, any VITO, if they got our letter, email, or LinkedIn invitation. And Beth, if you would, go to the next slide.
Okay.
Don't use the word I in any conversation you have with VITO, especially not in your elevator pitch or telephone opening statement. I would like to, I need, I understand, I know, I have, I was wondering. Come on. The word I puts the emphasis on us. The emphasis does not belong on us. The emphasis belongs on VITO. As a matter of fact, picture in your mind VITO wearing a blouse or a shirt, and on the front of it and the back of it, it says, it's all about me, because it is all about VITO. So don't use the word I, not only in your opening statement, but in your entire relationship with VITO. Words like we or our are fine, but not I. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
No F words, no F bombs, no facts, features, or functions that are unfamiliar to VITO. When we use one word that VITO either doesn't understand or doesn't care about, we will cause an immediate either physical disconnect, clicking a dial tone, hey, I don't have time to this, or an emotional disconnect, which is, oh, God, I wish this person would shut up. No F words. Now, F words, which, it's so common for we salespeople to use techno-babble and industry jargon and acronyms and product names and numbers. We have to eliminate them from our vocabulary when we're speaking to VITOs. Now, Beth, if you would go to the next slide.
Okay.
Here's the problem with F words. They describe what your product is. And what your product is can be easily and negatively prejudged. With accounting services, oh, you know what? We have accounting services. We're all set. Thanks, but no thanks. It's network security. Oh, we've already taken care of that. Thanks, but no thanks. It's e-source. We've already done. So every time we mention what our product is, it can be easily and quickly negatively prejudged and dismissed as, no thanks, we already got it. So we must stop using words and phrases that describe what our product is. Beth, if you would, the next don't.
Okay.
Don't ask for an appointment. Now, don't tell your manager I said that. But here's the deal. VITOs spend their whole day, if not their whole week, month, year, and life telling people what to do. They don't like to be told what to do. They like to tell people what to do. And asking for an appointment prematurely will get you a no, because you haven't earned the right to do that yet. So in our opening statement, in our first conversation with VITO, we're not going to ask them for an appointment. We're going to say something to them that throws them the keys to the bus and let them tell us what to do, because that's what they love to do. Now, with that list of don'ts that we just went through, you probably said, oh, this is great. You've just taken away everything I've ever done in my telephone opening statement. What am I going to do? Just hang on the phone and do a little heavy breathing till I get interrupted? Well, you could certainly try that. but it's probably not a good idea. So now, let's dive into the do's, what we must do to snag the intentional area of Vito's brain in the first 5 seconds. We either have him in the elevator or on the phone. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
I want everybody to take a real deep breath and get lots of oxygen to their brains, because what we need to do right now is think about what your product does, not what your product is. So if you're not driving your car or operating heavy equipment or flying your private airplane somewhere, get a piece of paper and a pencil. And now, Beth, let's look at the next slide and dive into what your product does, not what it is.
Okay.
With regards to the 4 bullet points you see on the screen in front of you, and if you don't happen to be looking at a screen, I'm going to read it to you. So here it is. With regards to revenue growth, what can your product do for VITO in the area of revenue growth? Do you suspect or do you have some proof that your ideas, your product, service, and solution can possibly help increase the revenue growth of VITO Incorporated? That's number 1. Number 2, the product, service, and solution that you represent, can it help VITO increase effectiveness and efficiencies of anyone or everyone or anything or everything at VITO Incorporated? Number 3, can it help VITO reduce or control expenses and costs in any area of VITO's company? Can you move from an unpredictable and uncontrollable cost environment to a more predictable and more controllable cost environment? And number 4 on the list, can you help VITO manage or mitigate risk? Now, these are not in any particular order. Having your hand on the pulse of the industry that VITO is in and the industry that you happen to be prospecting into or serving with your product, service, or solution, it'd be helpful for you to know what the priorities are in that industry at any point in time. And these shift, the time of the year, the time of the month, or whatever. These 4 items move around, but these are the 4 items. This is what VITO gets paid for. This is what VITO has the golden parachute for. This is what VITO grows their company for. These 4 areas. So jot down what you know you can do, or you suspect or guess or predict that you can do in one or more of those 4 areas for VITO. Now, here's my guess, because I've been doing this for a while. Here's my guess. As you look at this list, you probably can do at least 2, maybe 3, and a lot of instances, all 4. I didn't make up this list. The VITOs of the world made up this list for me. This is very predictable. It's very repeatable. So as we move forward, think about what your product does, not what it is. And what could it do, or what do you suspect it can do, or one or more of these 4 areas that you see or you just heard me say. Beth, if you would, let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to just guess for a moment, I'm going to make an assumption, that you can do at least 2 of the 4. You either suspect or you can prove that you can help VITO do at least 2 of the 4 areas that you just heard me talk about. Now, when we articulate our ideas or our suspicions, we need to do it using something I'll call value VITO style. Now, what you're about to see is rich in just human psychological behavior. What drives us? What drives us is, oddly, the same thing that drives VITO. Let's take a look at what value VITO style really means. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
The first motivator we all have is moving towards a reward, a desirable outcome over achievement of a goal, some pleasurable experience. We move towards a reward. That's really a universal motivator for all of us. The second motivator, and Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
would be moving away from doom, demise, disaster, failure, and risk. That's the second motive. There's only two. We're either moving towards something we want or we're trying to avoid something we don't want. Now, at any point in time, what we're moving towards and what we're moving away from changes, of course, but we're going to make some rock solid estimates and assumptions here. Here's the assumption. We know that if we approach someone like VITO with an idea to move towards something they want, while at the same time moving away from something they don't want, we give them the whole enchilada, the full Monty. It's not a half-baked potato. If you just show up on VITO's doorstep talking about something they want to move towards, they have this lingering concern about what it might cost them or what they have to give up to get what they want. So every time we approach VITO, whether we write it, say it, leave it on voicemail, kick it out of leaflets of a low and small aircraft flying over their parking lot, whatever way we articulate this to VITO, we must present something that we know or we suspect that they want to move towards, while at the same time, something we know or we suspect that they want to move away from. And, Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Yep.
Time. That's okay. If you're on the yap slide, I'll go there.
Motivator. Yep. For example?
Okay, for example, you have the move towards with the further increased new business revenues up to 5%.
Uh-huh.
Okay. That is a classic VITO Speak statement, moving towards something. And I'm assuming for a moment this is a number I made up. We'll figure out your numbers. But let's just say you suspect or you could help VITO further increase new business revenues up to 5%. That's something they want to move towards. While at the same time, and Beth, if you would now, the next slide, which shows the move away.
Okay.
While cutting a top 10 annual expense by as much as 17%. Now, these numbers I will help you establish. Don't get hung up on, we can't do that. Here, the essence of what I'm showing you is this beautiful, balanced, we call it yap, we call it VITO Speak, showing something that VITO may want to move towards, while at the same time, something they want to move away from, that you could either prove through social proof or you suspect you can do for their organization. Now, the other piece of magic here, Beth, if you would, the next slide, which shows the measurable results in just 120 days. Now, all of these numbers you see in front of you, I'm just making them up, but I don't make up your numbers. I work with you to create these numbers and these statements. This is a perfect example of VITO value style. As you look back at the notes you took for those 4 areas that you either know or you suspect you can help VITO move towards while they're moving away from, we put them into these little nuggets, these little sound bites. And now I'm going to show you how you can say this in an elevator pitch or opening statement to a VITO. But I want you to realize that we need to have something that we either know through our research or industry knowledge, or we suspect that this VITO wants to move towards, while we either know through our research or industry knowledge that VITO wants to move away from, or we suspect it. And how much time would it help or take VITO to do this? We call this yap, oddly enough, or VITO Speak. It is a nugget. It is a soundbite that we incorporate into our elevator pitch and telephone opening statement. And now I'm going to show you how this sounds and where it shows up. So, Beth, if you would, go to the next slide.
Okay.
So here's the deal. We're going to talk about VITO picking up the phone. And the reality of it, there's 3 great outcomes when we pick up the phone, that 3,000-pound phone, and make our calls. We don't know who's going to answer. VITO can answer. VITO's private assistant can answer, or you get dumped into voicemail. And yes, I know there's gatekeepers, and we can talk about how to work effectively with gatekeepers. But at the end of the day, there's 3 great outcomes, and we're going to put together an opening statement for when VITO picks up the phone. So, Beth, if you would, the next slide, to show the roadmap of an opening statement. There are 5 pieces to it.
Uh-huh.
The first piece, and Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
VITO's name. Now, I'm going to show you 5 pieces, but when you say this, they all run together. You're not going to say to VITO, well, now I'm going to give you the second part. This is monologue. You just roll right through it. The reason we put Vito's name first is because when Vito picks up the phone, they usually say, Vito, how can I help you? Or it's Vito. Or if you call in a Vito in New Jersey, they probably say, what do you want? You say their name. When you say their name, it breaks their preoccupation. You could say their name and their title. When Vito picks up the phone and says, Vito, you could say something like, Ms. Importanta, the president of the ABC company? Yep, that's me. And as soon as they say, yep, that's me, you got them. Right then and right there, you've broken preoccupation because you don't know what Vito might be doing at that moment in their office. They're busy people. They're signing checks, patting back, shaking hands, scaring babies. Who knows what they're doing? You say their name to hopefully break preoccupation. Next, Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
You then say either a pleasantry or social proof. Now, you could say both or one or the other. Let me give you an example of what a pleasantry is not. Beth, if you would go to the next slide.
Okay.
A pleasantry is not, how are you today? Or is this a good time? Or the purpose of my call is, or I would like to. That's not what I'm talking about, a pleasantry. Don't use that stuff. Everybody else is using that stuff. And if it wasn't a good time, Vito wouldn't have picked up the phone. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Here are some examples of a pleasantry, and I got like 30 of them I can give to you. It's an honor to speak with you, or it's an honor to finally speak with you, or thanks for taking my call, or what a surprise to get you live. That's it. It's a pleasantry. You say it with a smile on your face because it has to have like an upbeat and your DNA in it. Upbeat noise, upbeat style, and a little bit of your personal flair. Next, Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Social proof. Vitos love to know if you're helping others in their industry. Not by name, because you might be helping a competitor, but certainly by a ranking. Like 75 other CEOs rely upon us to, or 3 of the top 10 chemical processing companies, or the 5 largest logistics companies in Atlanta. The closer to the bone social proof is to Vito's world, the more power it will have. Social proof has to be specific and relevant and scalable to the Vito you're contacting. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Now, you're going to say to Vito that yap or VITO Speak, that moving towards and moving away from statement we just talked about, right there in the center. And guess what? This is typically where you'll be interrupted. The sooner you get to your yap or your VITO Speak, the sooner Vito will say, this sounds interesting, tell me more. Where the heck did you get those numbers from? Or who are you doing this with? Or who the heck is this? Yeah, Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Here's the yap, here's the VITO Speak. It's just an example. Further increase new business revenues up to 5% while cutting a top 10 annual expense by as much as 17% with measurable results in just 120 days. Done. Great place for Vito to say, well, hold on here. How'd you do that? Who is this? Where'd you get these numbers from? Who'd you do this for? It's a lovely place to get that priceless tell me more interruption. But if you don't get it, you're going to go to the next slide. You're going to go to the next part. And Beth, please go to the next slide.
I like that.
I like that too. Okay, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, now you bring Vito's name into it and your name. Yeah. This is a good place to put your name because the cat's out of the bag. Vito has an idea of what you can do, and now they care about who you are. And the reason I like to put my name here and my company name here, if I really make a mess out of this, if I make an idiot out of myself and I screw it up, I could just tell Vito I'm with one of my competitors and slam the phone down. That's my definition of a win-win right there. But you're not going to screw it up. Don't worry about screwing it up. You put Vito's name back in here and your name, and then Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Which is your ending question. Now, most of the time, I got to tell you, you're not even going to get to your ending question. The crafting that I'll do, the tailoring that I'll do for your yap and your VITO Speak will get an interruption. But if it doesn't, you got to be ready with an ending question. Beth, if you would, go to the next slide.
Okay.
Here's an example of an ending question. Ms. Importanta, we'll prosper with ABCO here in San Diego. Who on your team would you like for me to continue this conversation with between now and the end of this business day? Oh, wait a minute, Tony. Hold on. You're giving Vito a chance to wiggle away. Well, sort of, but I'm not going to let it happen. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Here's another example of an ending question. Mr. Benefito, we'll prosper with ABCO. What's the next best step to take to see if we can create similar or greater results for you between now and the end of this year? Yeah. Throw the keys to the bus in Vito's lap. I got a bunch of openings and a bunch of ending questions I'll share with you. But let me share this with you. Beth, if you would, go to the next slide.
Okay.
Which shows the entire opening statement. Here it is all together. Vito's name, Pleasantry or social proof, Yap Yap, VITO Speak, Vito's name and your name, and ending question. 5 parts that all blend together, but in that place that we call Yap Yap and VITO Speak, that little nugget, is where you're going to get interrupted. Now, I want to share with you, and Beth, if you would go to the next slide, an opening statement from an alumni before they joined our little community and started to be mentored by me. Here's what they used to say. Good afternoon, Ms. Oh, I'm sorry, Beth, the next slide.
The alumni opening statement before?
Yeah, the first part of it, yeah.
Yep,
right.
We're there.
Okay. It says good afternoon right on top there?
Yep.
Okay. Good afternoon, Ms. Importanta. How are you today? Now, I'm underlining that in red because we never want to ask how someone is, because generally we don't really care, and generally they don't really want to tell us. And then introducing yourself like this person used to say, my name is Will Parrish with ABCO Accounting Services. Just the name of the company shows the it of what it is, and it could get negatively prejudged right there by somebody saying, you know what, we already got all the accounting services we need, thanks but no thanks. And it's done. You're toast. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
I'd like to speak with you. Hold on. Vito doesn't care what you want. They care about what they want. And I'd like to speak with you about how my company helps other retailers like you. Listen, there's no other retailer like Vito's. There's no other manufacturer like Vito's. There's no other life sciences company like Vito's. Vito has a unique company with a unique character. So we never want to say retailers like you. We never want to do that. Next, Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Common problems like security, remote access, network optimization, which leads to an overall reduction in IT spend. Listen, these are those F words we were talking about before. Now, Vito might understand what this is, but it's not on Vito's to-do list. You sound like a technologist, so therefore, guess what? You're going to get sent to the technology department, and you're not going to have a conversation with Vito at all. These are those F words that we have to take totally out of our vocabulary. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
I'd like to discuss, here again, Vito's don't care what you like, how we could do the same for your organization. Guess what? Vito doesn't want the same done for his or her organization. They want something better. And Beth, finally, the next slide.
Okay.
Are you available Tuesday or Thursday afternoon of next week? This is the alternate choice for a close. This was outdated when I was taught it 35 years ago or 40 years ago. Look at all this redlining on here. This has to stop. And we helped it stop for this alumni. Now I'm going to show you my rewrite. And Beth, if you would, go to the next slide.
Okay. After my tailoring process?
Yes, stay right there for a minute. The whole black screen other than after my tailoring process. Here's what I do. I ask you like 5 questions. Based upon the answer to those questions, I might need to ask you a couple more questions. But when I get the answers to my questions that I need, then I tailor your entire telephone opening statement. And this is just an example of what I did for this one alumni. Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, you start out with Ms. Importanta. Yeah, that's me. You know, fine. Okay, you broke the preoccupation. Next slide, Beth. Here's a combination of pleasantry and social proof. Thanks for taking my call. We suspect our collective experience with 10 retailers in San Diego may apply to, that's the social proof, the pleasantry and the social proof. And now, Beth, if you would, the next slide.
Okay.
Here comes the VITO Speak and Yap Yap, further increasing your new business revenues up to 5% while cutting a top 5 annual operational expense by as much as 17%. That's the nugget. That's where VITO might and hopefully and usually says, whoa, where'd you get these numbers from? Who the heck is this and how'd you pull that off? But if they don't say that, Beth, we continue on.
Okay.
Next slide. Ms. Importanta, this is Will Prosper with Abco. Notice I dropped accounting services, the is of it, just the name. Next, Beth, next slide, Beth.
Okay.
Here's the ending question. Who on your team would you like for me to continue this conversation with between now and the end of this business day? Done. Now, this is a process. And I guide you through this process, and I hold your hand while you do it. Do you see the difference, the before and after difference here? Do you see as it's tailored to VITO, and it's tailored to the industry that this particular person was in? Everything needs to be tailored. One size never fits all. So, Beth, if you would go to the next slide.
Okay.
So now we're getting to know each other a little bit. Maybe this makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but for those of you who it makes sense for, I'll create your tailored VITO opening statement, voicemail messages, correspondence, and VITO presentations. That's what I do for a living. And that's what I could do for you. And the best way for me to help you at this point, Beth, if you would go to the next slide.
Okay, we're there.
Okay, go to VITOSalesTraining.com and register for the VITO University Part 1. When you do that, I will ask you a few questions, and then I'll give you your entire tailored telephone opening statement along with some other goodies. But before you do that, do you have any questions for me? So, Beth, let's do this. I know we're into just 2 or 3 minutes of overtime here, but if people have a question and they want to hang out, then I'm willing to do that. So you want to ask if there's any questions and tell people how to do that, and then I'm going to take a little sip of water while you do that.
Okay. If you have a question, to the left of your dashboard, there's a little hand icon. If you just click on that, I will unmute your line and give you the stage to ask your question. If you are in a place where you cannot ask a question, but you want to ask a question, you can use the chat feature and send me the message, and I will ask it on your behalf.
Easy peasy. Got a question, ask it. You can also, after this event, because you're going to be getting this archive and the slides and the audio, if something pops into your mind, you can ask it then. Or you can just go ahead and register for VITO University Part 1. Everything we do is totally guaranteed. If you invest in anything that we do and you don't get the result you want, you get your money back. That's that. That's our ongoing policy that we have. So if you have a question, now's a good time to ask it. By the way, we polled the audience before this event, and several of you sent in questions that were very involved questions that I'm going to answer. So if you responded to that little email we sent out and said, hey, you know, what are your problems with regards to this, that, and the other thing? If you sent us an email, I'm going to respond to you directly on those questions. So don't be concerned about that. And we had a nice response on that. Talking about questions now that have come up during the event that you heard something or saw something you'd like to comment on.
All right, we've got some questions, Tony.
Okay, what do you got?
Robert said, use your strategies. When I first read your book in telecom for years and years, I now help clients in the office coffee space and will be contacting you regarding opening statements next week. Yay. Welcome.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for being a fan. That's very cool. Yeah.
Linda said, how do you get past the gatekeeper properly?
Nice question. Let's handle that right now. So Linda, here's the deal. There's two types of gatekeepers that I believe we need to know how to deal with. The receptionist gatekeeper, which there are less and less of these days. They're usually electronic these days, but let's put that category aside for a minute, receptionist gatekeeper. But now let's talk about VITO's private assistant. These are the most important people that will be picking up the phone other than VITO. Whenever, and let's just call that person Tommy. Whenever VITO's private assistant Tommy picks up the phone, we treat Tommy like VITO, period. Treat Tommy like VITO, treat Tommy like VITO, treat Tommy like VITO. Who are you going to treat Tommy like? VITO. Now, what that means is that whatever we would have said to VITO, we're going to say to Tommy. The entire opening statement is the same with one exception. We say our name up front because the Tommies of the world want to know who they're talking to. So we announce who we are, then we jump right into that beautiful yap, yap, and VITO speak we were talking about, because if it would resonate with VITO, if it would break VITO's preoccupation and have them say, tell me more, Tommy will respond the same way or in a very similar way. Now, why is that? Because Tommies are very well connected to VITO. They know what's going on in the organization, which means we should never say to a Tommy, is VITO in? If VITO's standing right next to Tommy, Tommy's going to say, no, they're not in. And so we don't treat Tommy like they work for us. Would you take a message? Don't do that. Treat Tommy like VITO every step along the way. Ask the same ending question that we would ask a VITO of Tommy. Tommy, who's the best person in your organization, besides yourself, of course, that you would like for me to continue this conversation with between now and the end of this business day? Tommy's going to say, well, you know what? VITO would probably want you to talk to. When you ask in Tommy, they respond in VITO. When this happens, you're probably going to have to cover up the phone and you'll giggle. You'll say, this is happening just like Tony said it would, because it's human nature. So now that covers Tommy. Everything we talked about today, and as we roll into the future with VITO, applies to Tommy. With some minor, very minor exceptions, but not many. Gatekeepers at the receptionist level, here again, if when you make your prospecting calls, you find yourself getting shunted and sent to someone in purchasing or a buyer or someone in marketing or admin, whatever you're saying to the gatekeeper receptionist is telling them that's who you need to speak with. So when you use a portion of this VITO speak and yap yap with a gatekeeper receptionist, they're going to put your call through to VITO, especially if you, and I would hope, know VITO's name, know VITO's title, and know how to pronounce their name. Yeah. The receptionist says, what's the call about? You give them a thin slice of your yap yap and VITO speak. They're not going to say, well, geez, sounds to me like you need to speak with a purchasing agent. Come on. Sound like VITO, get sent to VITO. Linda, I hope that helps. And if you sign up for part 1 of VITO University, you get this wonderful e-lesson about the details of all this gatekeeper stuff we're talking about here. So I hope that answers Linda's question. What else you got?
Okay. Brian asked, our resume is designed with social proof. Is it okay to use this same format when seeking employment with VITOs?
Oh, my. This is a great question. I actually authored a really good article for the periodical Careers in the MBA. I authored an article that teaches people how to use this approach when looking for a job. So yes, Brian, you're spot on, man. Think about this. You're selling yourself. Well, geez, the first sales call we make even to sell something else, we're selling ourselves. So yes, everything we're talking about here applies to finding a job, rewriting your resume. And I'm more than willing and able to help you do that, to make the VITO approach to find the job. Yeah, and it all starts with that part 1 of VITO University. And it ends up with me holding your hand while you're making the calls to get your job or to sell to VITO. Yes, so it does apply. Good question. Yeah. Who else we have?
Paya asked, cultural adjustments possible?
Paya, oh yeah. It's interesting. I was just talking to someone the other day about cultural differences. And here in America, we probably have more cultures than anywhere else in the world in any one country. So yes, I mean, think about this. People in New York with the Manhattan Minute, people down in the Southeast, a little bit, more methodical, a little bit more casual. People in the Southwest, like where I live out in San Diego, they're like mañana, dude. And then people up in the Pacific Northwest are different. So yeah, you got to dial into the culture, be culturally sensitive. And if you are finding yourself calling into other cultures, then seek out, not for me, but seek out some good cultural diversity training. Yes, there are differences, most certainly. And I'm no expert in the cultural differences around the world, but I certainly have been selling in the United States for 40 some odd years. And yeah, there's a different vibe, and you got to dial into it. Yep.
Did anybody else get the visual of the turtle in the Dory movie? Yeah, when you said the manana, manana, that was hilarious. Okay, Robert said, love it. Just passed your first copy from the 90s to a person new in sales, explaining if she wants to be like everyone else, don't study it or do anything with it.
Robin, thank you so much, man. You're making my day. I love that, giving someone a book that you've read and got something out of and saying, hey, if you want to be like everybody else, don't read it. The essence of selling, in my mind, is standing above and beyond the competition in an ethical, doable, practical, tactical, fun, and authentic way. And so everything I say, everything I write, everything we do together, you'll be putting your own thumbprint on. You have to own it. Once you own it, the magic begins. So Robert, you're a pay it forward kind of person, giving people a piece of intellectual work that you have read. There's so many good books out there. Yeah, read and pay it forward. Yeah, thanks for the comment.
Ira says, when I pick up my phone and a sales rep says, thanks for taking my call, it annoys me because I didn't take their call. I just picked up my phone.
Well, Ira, then don't use that one. I've got about 25 or 30 other pleasantries that you can consider. But here's the thing: your gut feeling is important to pay attention to. Your buy-in is important. However, don't prejudge or cut something short because you don't happen to like it when someone does it to you. So we'll test stuff. That's what I like about choices. And that's what I honor everyone's intuition on this and your gut about it. Sometimes we've got to stretch a little bit to get away from our intuition or our gut, but usually it doesn't misguide us. But we'll be able to tailor stuff and you pick and choose what you want. So if you have bad experiences with one particular item, then don't use it. No sense of it. Give you another option. What else you got?
Robert said, lastly, I'm getting ready to run out for an appointment. Is there a copy of this presentation I can download in preparation for our work? Everybody that registered for this event will get this recording sent directly to them. So,
that's nice.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the power. That's the slides and the audio, right, Beth?
All together, yes. Not separately, but yes, together. All right. Garrett says, hi, I'm sitting over here with a big smile in Cape Town because your energy is contagious and it's good to hear this again. Want to work with you again. Surf's up.
Oh, Garrett from Cape Town, South Africa. Thanks for joining us.
Right.
This is actually, it gives me goosebumps because it is the beauty of the VITO community that people around the world can dial into this and here again, take it into their culture and use it. So way to go. And yeah, surf is up. What else we got, Beth?
Yeah, I bet the surf is up. We got a lot of crazy weather
Yeah, we do.
going on.
Yeah.
Okay. If there are, Brian says, thanks, great conversation. We'll stay in touch. If there are no more questions, we're going to go ahead and wrap this call up so that we can get the recording off to you. Robert said, see you next week. Thank you, everyone who showed up and was a part of it and registered. We look forward to working with you. Again, VITOSalesTraining.com, and register for VITO University. And that's your next step if you want to take that one with us.
Yeah.
Anything else, Tony?
Yeah, no, part one, that does it. And until we speak again, have yourselves a masterful rest of the day. And Beth, thank you so much for driving the bus here and changing those slides for us. I really appreciate what you've done to pull us all together. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.